All right, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We're going to run through our STARS meeting. You might have noticed the slight retitle on our meeting here. We're trying to be a little more accurate. Plus, if you'll have some sympathy for us, everything on our calendar said STARS meeting. It was getting a little tough to separate everything. And so we just wanted to kind of reflect the goal and purpose of this meeting with a little rebranding. And then also, we're going to kind of talk about some of our other sites are going to be doing STARS meetings with their EMS providers, community hospitals, and other super users as well. And so we're kind of encouraging everyone to name it after their area. Got a decent amount of stuff to run through on the agenda today, including we got a couple call reviews and talk about some updates to the system. Got some breaking news to lead it all with. In some exciting news, we have signed on a new site to join us on our STARS adventure. So, Norton Children's Hospital from Louisville, Kentucky, signed on and will be starting. So, we'll be working on implementing at their hospital over this fall, and we'll start to add even more people to the mission and purpose here. Wanted to give a kudos and a shout out to a couple of groups. So first of all, thanks to Central County and Flow Valley. We ran into a patient with a significant language barrier. We do run into this occasionally of just kind of unique, I won't say one-off languages, but very rare for the St. Louis region languages. And they were able to, add a note for that kiddo, and we're gonna try to make sure we can communicate the plan because there's just the family will not be able to give any of the background or history for this kiddo. And so we're thankful for them to continue to work with us on that, and for keeping premise notes on pertinent stars. Also wanted to thank not just Rocks. Rocks are very valuable to all of us, but particularly Rock Township and Rock Community did a home visit for a new to home trach vent patient. So just as always, thank you to our coordinators and teams who have the bandwidth to continue to make that connection between family and EMS prior to an emergency. I do have some resources, especially shout out to Danny Lee from MU and EMSC, who worked on putting together a number of resources for this. So some ways or some documents, some forms, some questions we can build in. So if that's something that your agency is interested in, but you're not quite sure where to start, please feel free to reach out to us and we'll connect you with what we have so far. And then this is also just a section of the world we're very interested in continuing to work on. We think it pays massive dividends, helping the family get settled, to have a name and a face from the local EMS agency and just to start to solve some problems before we get to a 911 call. And then the final kudos I wanted to shout out of just our Florida partner, Angie Holmes is the STARS coordinator at their hospital, and she's given a couple of talks this summer and continuing to find ways to use information we're finding out from STARS to look at other things within the hospital. So very specifically, in the case of this poster, was door to dock times. And very interestingly, they were able to not only improve time for the STARS patients, but they saw overall improvement across all of their patient population in their ED. Wanted to pivot here real quick, just something really noteworthy in the data so far this year has been there's been a ton of trach management in the calls. And to make it onto this list that Morella keeps, that means like actual interventions are rendered. That's not just like you put a trach patient in the back of your rig. That is suctioning, applying oxygen to a trach collar, bagging, doing a trach change, all of that's included in there. So of the over 250 calls we've have data for and have documented so far this year, you can see nearly 40 of those cases involved taking care of the trach. And obviously that's super important to us, especially for those of you who've had me out to teach at your sites. That's, invaluable, like trying to get everybody comfortable with how to take care of these kids and their medical devices. Um, so one thing I did want to just kind of address on the trach front that had come up recently, there's long been kind of this question of, okay, well, we get it, trachs are important, paramedics can do that because they touch tubes that touch tracheal walls. But should an EMT know anything about it, or EMT be able to do anything about it? And we continue to advocate, yes, from this office. We believe that is absolutely an EMT skill. That's actually a layperson skill. We teach parents how to do this. So we think it's important. And just for those of you who are kind of, advocates for us too and super users, just to address that. It is actually in the national scope and the national education that EMT should have some education on this. So I took this straight out of the National Association of EMS Educators. And you can see kind of their different breakdowns for the topics of at least, you should have minimal knowledge, some medium knowledge, or super in-depth knowledge. And if you directly map that to tracheostomy care and dysfunction, even EMTs are supposed to have a basic knowledge of the device and troubleshooting it. And so I would certainly argue from an official standpoint that means, we need to continue to pursue and provide this education outwards. Um, and so I certainly would like to use that to address that issue, and also just from a an unfortunate real life perspective, this is an airway emergency for a kid who's going down in front of you, and the quite simply the sad fact is if you do not act, you might be about to witness something truly horrific. So I think the way we fix this is increasing education and training, not by running away from it. So as always, happy to come out and teach to anyone who feels like it's been a while since we've been there. We do have the online trach course, at least a 30-minute refresher available on the LMS. So truly want to continue to change that part of the world. So any questions on that from my educators? Not to put anybody on the spot or anything. And then do have just a couple of call reviews to talk through for today. So first one, this is a trach kiddo here at Glennon. And you can see he'd been kind of slow deterioration all day. So not an uncommon tracheostomy story. Documented, by EMS was mom had attempted to change his inner cannula. Now he actually has a single lumen tube, so I think they meant to say that mom had done a trach change at home. And he actually has he takes Atarax as an anti-anxiety or an anxiolytic. Sorry, my medical terms are failing me. Anti-anxiety, also known as an anxiolytic. And mom had tried suctioning, but he kept just getting worse and worse and worse. Good documentation on as far as how they found him. They did note that they had to bring his sats up with oxygen. And then they did suction him and documented, getting frothy white mucus. So, as always, that's one of the valuable ways to document that you have a good patent tube. I didn't bring over their physical documentation, but they also noted lung sounds. One thing I was going to just call out for room for improvement, we do continue to believe that in title is the gold standard if you're transporting a trach kiddo, and just another opportunity to say, how was their ventilatory status? Especially as you'll see shortly, this kiddo was actually required some ventilation once he got to the hospital. So other than that, good care got him to us. You can see the ED coursers kind of mapped out here. He was in some respiratory acidosis. They ended up putting him on to the ventilator just to try and correct his blood gas. He has a history of muscular atrophy as well. So he can kind of get into some trouble not breathing well for himself. So they attempted that and then moved him on up to the PICU. PICU course went relatively well. He was weaned pretty quickly back down to a trach collar. Did end up ultimately diagnosing him with some tracheitis. Went on some antibiotics and was able to take him back to his home equipment and discharge him home just a couple days later. So good outcome and just some good documentation, good care. Um, we did end up adding a new STARS note out of it, but just especially for our older kids and when we're well past the NICU stage, but our teenagers with trachs, that can still be a pretty fear-inducing thing for some of those kiddos. And so just, we often teach it as if you're changing a trach on a baby, but you might be in a situation where you're actually talking to and coaxing and coaching a patient as you go to do the trach change. And I know you guys do that each and every day, but just that good communication as you're talking a patient through a procedure. And then this crew did reach out. They thankfully, they completed our EMS survey, which we have now in both the EDs here at our children's hospitals. And they requested follow-up, and we were able to kind of give them some follow-up. So just a reminder to your crews, if they would like to know more afterwards, it's a super simple way to request a follow-up from the STARS team whenever they transport. I was going to briefly mention this one. So this is a kiddo with a history of congenital adrenal hyperplasia. Had actually been having kind of a brittle summer, had already had a couple other emergencies. And this is just straight out of their STARS form. But they, families were trying to be families and they were trying to go on a summer float trip. And unfortunately, the kiddo kind of got sick, some nausea, vomiting, was really having trouble keeping food down and got increasingly stressed. Did end up at a outside hospital where they got their emergency hydrocortisone meds. And then transport team went and grabbed them. But I was just going to use it. This is a major emergency. We don't see it that often. I was just going to kind of display it here as an example of how these kids can present to you when they're in that adrenal crisis. So nausea and vomiting, super common, low blood sugar, so that hypoglycemia. And then they did end up looking kind of shocky initially with elevated heart rate, a little tachycardia, and some hypotension. So often looks like septic shock, but was just this kid's pathophys and did get some steroids that turned him around pretty quickly. So was transferred to us and just admitted for a couple days observation. Also had to kind of restore the intake as well, so getting them some more nutrition on board. The final call review I had for you was a seizure kiddo here. This is going to be an example of another language barrier call. But this is a kid, family's got a pretty significant language barrier. I'm not going to read all of that to you, but season here in the middle of July in St. Louis, so the house was warm. I believe this house was out of AC, so maybe even warmer. Um, and you can see that the crew kind of documented all that, which I thought was phenomenal documentation. I don't always get, kind of the environmental rundown of where a seizure kiddo was picked up. You can, if you were kind of scanning this through while I read, they did note the seizure duration. They kind of talked around the language barrier a little bit, but they initially thought, mom kind of indicated that she had given the diastat for the emergency. But as they got further through the call and went to deliver at the ED, kind of turns out that mom actually was super unsure of herself, was uncertain, and ended up at calling EMS specifically for that purpose. So I think that's just good to talk about because we say all the time, right? Like parents are experts in their children, and they certainly are. They have a lot of knowledge, but they're human beings like you or me. You and I have all been in the back of an ambulance and had a moment of misgiving of, should I treat this? Should I not? Where am I at on this? And that certainly happens to the parents too, especially first time. It's actually they've had an emergency since then where mom gave the diastat twice in one day, so clearly gained some confidence and some comfort with it. And so just something to talk through with that. I was also going to give them kudos, and I've seen this in more and more of your trip sheets, but documenting safe transport practices, putting them in a PD mate or how you secured them. So that was in there as well. So I just wanted to call out a few good things that we saw in some trip sheets. This kiddo ultimately got the neuro workup in the ED, a Klonopin bridge, and was admitted to neurology for just evaluation. So. Cool. Any questions that come to mind out of the calls or any concerns?
Did they know what language they were speaking, or how'd they get around that? Do you know?
Yeah, so that family speaks Somali, and so not super easy to usually get translation services available for that. So um, they kind of used the form. So mom actually presented them with the form whenever they got there, and so they used some of our paperwork to get through it. But I think that was also maybe indicative of the miscommunication on scene. So I think there was a lot of pantomiming and trying to informally communicate. It's certainly a challenge. There's not, an easy out we can offer you either. I will say, like, if you're stuck in a kind of a really tough situation, it is part of the reason why we make our ED. Certainly, you're welcome to try Glennon's ED for our kiddos or the Access Center. I don't know. I'm gonna get Beth in hot water here before we even get started. But like, whether we could even activate our interpretive, translational interpretive services, but we might at least be able to get you some more help if one of your crews is stuck there and really having trouble communicating. Ultimately, if the kid is critically ill, and even if you can't communicate, I mean, you've all dealt with that on John Doe calls, right? And so, worst case scenario, you're going to transport under implied consent and just treat to the best of your abilities. But if there's like some question of whether like a refusal, like family doesn't want them to go, wants them to go, if you're kind of stuck there, I certainly think reaching out through a language barrier and just kind of explaining to ED, it's a super valid reason to me to get online medical control involved if your crews are uncomfortable in those. So hope that helps. Yeah, there was no element of, translation in here at all. I think mom was trying to communicate as best she could. As opposed to the call I referenced earlier with Flow Valley, like that family just has a complete language barrier, like full stop. Like I they are going to call 911 and not even be able to like relay numbers or anything like that. So
I'll just interject on that. We are working on the potential of having interpreter services for stars that you all could utilize, but right now that is not up and running. I guess my question for you all is, do you all have any type of resources available as you're out on a call, even through dispatch?
I've used Google Translate before, but again, that's not the most.
Okay,
Uh,
that's kind of what I wondered. Okay. The other tool I will share we have ordered and are hoping to maybe engage some volunteers to trial is we have some interpreter decks where it's kind of an if then this will happen. And it's in probably up to 10 different languages. And so it's kind of a square where like you have a broken arm picture and then giving medication picture, but it translates English to whatever language they have. So I don't know if that's a helpful resource to have, but we'll throw that out there if anybody wants to trial it.
Some of the dispatch agencies have a language line service. It's not used very often, so it's kind of janky. Um, we're investigating a couple of language services along with some of accreditation requirements. We have one that's it's a bundle package for however much you need to use it, and then we have a different one we're evaluating that's like a per service fee. Both of them are pretty robust options, but they're not without cost. So that's a barrier for a lot of agencies.
Yeah. Okay. Maybe we can connect Stephanie and explore together.
thank you all. So just a resource update, a project that my team is working on. I can't take any credit for it, but trying to make it easier for families to kind of identify stars to help providers who are walking up to a house, even for a home visit or for, any other reason, some sort of window or door cling that family that EMS providers can identify, that families can share. I actually believe this is a shout out to Kim Aslan, who I believe helped trigger this project. So this is tentatively the what we're looking at creating and being able to write the numbers in for each kid. If you were to follow the QR code, and I feel like pretty soon my presentations are going to be like being at the Smithsonian, where like you just like walk along and scan QR codes. So please feel free to have your phones out for this adventure. So that is just to our info website. We didn't want it to go to the care plan website because then any family member or anybody else who doesn't have a STARS login who scanned it would just go to a dead end where they couldn't do anything. But this will take them to the STARS info website, telling people about the program. So we're working on that. Because of that, because there was the potential of 911 providers walking up to a house, seeing the QR code, realizing they're on a STARS call. We did, when you land on the info website as of yesterday, there is now a link at the top that will take you straight to the care plans. So if you're on an emergency call and you scan that QR code, you can quickly jump over and go get into the STARS care plans. So that is set up there now. So I definitely would take any thoughts. Would this be helpful to your providers? Do you see any barriers? I will say it's not meant to be foolproof. It's just yet another redundancy to make everybody aware of the kiddo and give them access to the STARS number for that kiddo.
Do those QR codes automatically update to the care plan? Like if someone has a sticker that's a year and a half old, if we scan it, will it hit that care plan, or will it go to the updated one?
So it's a good question. It actually won't go straight to the kiddo's care plan. It will take you to this website right here.
Right.
But then you can click the red. That won't go straight to that kid's care plan. It'll just go to the STARS website where you can look their number up. So that's sort of how we're addressing that. We always want people to get to where they can look up the number, but that makes sure they're getting the most recent one versus if I tried to give you a static URL. The only way I can do that is a plan that will eventually will get outdated and expired. So this is how we're kind of attempting to solve that. We're trying to get them back to the landing board, the landing page, where then they can look up the most up-to-date STARS plan.
Got it.
Cool.
I know for my service, that's going to be fantastic because of like all the mutual aids and people visiting family. We've already had a couple of kids that we found out after the fact were STARS kiddos, for one reason or another. So that would be fantastic, just so you know, going into it, especially if you have it for like grandparents and aunts and uncles that maybe visit with the kid quite frequently.
No, that's a super good point. Because we do, of course, we listen to the 911 tapes every now and then because people ask us to, or there's questions of was STARS activated or not. And one of the biggest challenges we see, especially in super critically ill calls, is that it's not the parent that's calling 911, right? Like the parent's treating the kid and they yell down the hall for, somebody else in the house to call 911. So yeah, I think as many family members and people in that kid's solar system that we can make aware of this, we're hoping that that'll pay off in lots of different ways, not just with your providers. So it's an excellent call out. All right. Just one last thing. Back to school. We've gotten a lot of requests already here on the hospital side to update plans and get them ready. And just especially for agencies who have some connection or are finding the bandwidth or an interest in connecting with your local schools and school nurses. Just always a good reminder that, an opportunity to find out, what their emergency planning is, what they do to activate 911. I've encountered a bunch of different systems as we go to different schools, and sometimes it's the administrative assistant that calls you guys, sometimes it's the other school nurse. It's just kind of all over the roadmap. So just another opportunity to reach out to another set of providers who use us pretty frequently in the field and kind of communicate ahead of time with how are you guys going to activate us, what's pertinent information, and then very specifically to the STARS, we're trying to encourage families to share it with school nurses as well and have that plan and education in place. And so we're actually even going to teach at a school next week too. So, cool. And the numbers, so kind of tongue in cheek, I did include Louisville. I hope we'll see more and more color there as the fall progresses. But continuing to see growth at our other sites. We added 26 new kids since our meeting last month. We did see, kudos to all the logins as well. So dispatchers continue to dominate. I hope you guys continue to win for all time. And then we had 42 dispatches for July 2025. As far as viewing the care plans, access reasons, still getting lots of reviews, lots for education, kind of emergency treatments now falling underneath 10%. And that's fine. We want it for emergency preparedness. We want everybody to be ready for these kiddos. As part of that of course, we get that graph from the Break the Glass. And I was just going to take a moment with a bunch of important people on the call, but thank you for using it. It's helping us a ton. Also, I was just going to encourage, just make sure you share with your crews that this is meant to be a resource to get, that information into their hands and prepare all of us just to be accurate about why you're getting into plans. Like there's no foul here. I like just as long as you're doing it with good intent and good purpose, just please tell us the reason you're getting into the plan. Um, and that has really helped us a lot with on hospital side and talking to risk controllers who are trying to understand from our side, like, okay, how can we change the rules or the contracts to allow you guys to share this even further and wider. Something everybody wants to know is, okay, at the end of the day, you are giving access to PHI. How do you know how people are getting into it and what they're doing with it? And just having everybody, pre-hospital and community hospital, report that to us helps us make that case that we think we can make this even freer and wider, with the parents' permission to get it into the hands of as many healthcare providers as possible for emergencies.
Nick, on that note, can you educate me, I guess? Maybe others have the same question. What would be the difference between care plan review and education and training? I feel like sometimes I would have said if I'm actually in the training, we would access it, but maybe like, when do you get in there for care plan review? Is it when you see an update that's come through?
Yeah, so I think that would be a valid one. So training, like if you're training with your providers or creating training, I think that would be a good reason to select that one. Care plan review would be, yeah, if you saw an update, if you thought maybe your crews had run them, and you're trying to figure out, okay, was this the kid over there? Care plan review is, in all honesty, kind of a bit of a catch-all. But if you're just trying to get in there and be like, okay, I just want to review this plan, see if anything's changed, if we need to update other lists that we keep in our district. I know some districts keep like mailing lists and stuff. Versus, you could also give us another on that. If you get in, if none of those reasons seem to really march out with what you're doing, click other, just tell us why. That's what I was going to put here on the next screen. These are just some examples of reasons why different STARS coordinators have gotten in and accessed the information. And so I think that's fine. I haven't reached out to a single one of these people and been like, what do you mean you were doing it for CAT updates? No, absolutely. That makes total sense. It's just, we didn't have a reason. But if we see a reason repeatedly putting in here, we'll just make you a quick button on the outside so you don't have to type it every time. So we're kind of scanning this list to see common reasons why people are getting in. So I think care plan review for my STARS coordinators, if you're just trying to review kids in your district, click that. It's something we use commonly here in the office. That's actually probably one of the reasons it's the highest percentage, or a care plan update when we go to change them. So yeah, so it's not meant to, there's no like, haha, I gotcha. It's like you click this and you should have clicked this, but we try to make them make sense and get them as accurate as possible. And if the button doesn't seem to reflect what you're doing, if you don't mind just click another, tell us why, and we'll see if we can improve the buttons. So thank you for asking that. That was a good thing to talk about. Transport calls for the month. I actually think there were a few more. We were only able to get documentation back on 22 of them. So we're kind of working on that, refining how we're getting trip sheets back from some of our EMS agencies. Non-transport calls, there were 7 for July. You can see direct to tertiary in 16 cases. And then respiratory distress and seizures were the most common, and respiratory distress was the most common for the non-transports. As I said, trach management continues to be huge. So for the July, we had 9 cases of EMS managing trachs. And then you can see just the different ways that EMS intervened for these kiddos. And then for MD approvals, we did see the number kind of extend out a little bit. It's somewhat, I think, a little bit of growth in putting kids further and further away. It's a little harder to engage some of the medical directors. So I was just going to briefly address that. That is part of the reason why we include the STARS coordinator in those emails so that they're CC'd in and they're aware that there's a kid coming to their agency. And then we also have that reminder set weekly that will continue to go to your medical director saying like, hey, you have a new plan to review. And then ultimately, if that hasn't worked after a week or two, we'll reach out and email and see if there's something we can do, a barrier we can remove or encourage adoption of the plan. We do still feel that physician approval is super important. That's what gives your providers, the sense or the empowerment to act on information in those plans without waiting to call online medical control. So we think that's really important. So we're going to continue to do that. But how can we work with you to help get those through your medical director? And so just something I was going to call a little attention to. I'm over time. I talk too much. Sorry, guys. Real quick, upcoming website changes. This will be released over the next month or two. It's kind of a multi-stage product. We are going to add some more information fields to your service provider in the background. That's going to allow us to track some more details and to make it easier to associate your service with your EMS region, with your medical control, so that all those players can interact appropriately. So I can talk a little bit more about that. That will not roll out before our next meeting. We can talk a little bit more about that at the next meeting. We had put out a request for service area maps. Thank you for those of you who responded. For everyone else, I was just going to highlight the importance of that. What we're trying to do is provide resources to care plan writers at the hospital, so that if they write a kid and they say this kid is in Johnson County, Missouri. Okay, I need to figure out what EMS providers are there. If they can pull up a map and be like, okay, I see that Johnson County Ambulance District covers this. So that's where we're going to use your maps is by county, by state, so that we can more accurately assign providers to plans. That applies to the EMRAs as well. If your county has first responder fire units who don't transport, that's really hard for a care plan writer at a hospital to know where all those lines are. But if we can start to get those maps, it'll help us be more accurate in assigning providers to the kids' plans. And then the final things I have are just the smorgasbord of QR codes. This is the interact with your phone time if you want. If you want to come run a 5K with us, please do. Education request. If you would like us to come out and teach at your agency, this is how you can request Glennon outreach. That is for STARS, but that's also for our other outreach educators as well. And then we have our new STARS video up. So please feel free to watch and share that with other people if you would like to. And all of this will be in the presentation that we'll send out the slide deck after this meeting. So I am so sorry that I ran over by a couple, but I will gladly hang on here if anyone's had any comments or questions. If everyone else or anyone else needs to run, please feel free. And thank you for being here.
Thanks, Nick.
Thank you.